Hello. Hmm. I was thinking today about multidimensionality, and this can be obviously a very broad topic that you could spend, oh gosh, not even hours. I mean, like years and years talking about, and it's something that has been spoken about for years and years and years, I'm sure. But on this wonderful, very rainy Sunday, I have had the joy of spending the day in my own company. And I really love that because it's in those moments where we are by ourselves that, and we're not distracted by technology, that we can actually hear the different aspects of our mind. We can hear our guides, even, and we can have some really wonderful conversations. And I was exploring the quite fun to me topic of every choice that we make. And I was having this conversation with my team of light, and I thought, this is something that I should maybe share. And I wonder what your thoughts are. I wonder what your experiences are. Because with all the change that is upon us, everything that we've moved through, that we've gone through, and of course, we don't need to go into eclipses, equinoxes, 10-10 portal, completion, new beginnings, eclipses bring change. We don't need to go into all of that. There are plenty of videos that not only myself have done, but I'm sure hundreds of thousands of others have as well. But noticing the potent and powerful energy that this past week has brought, it got me pondering upon this topic of choice and the holographic offshoot of each choice that we make. And I thought this would be a fantastic question to ask our star friends. And so I did. And they were saying that every choice that you make, and this is something that the mind, the brain that we have, the mind that we have in this human body, this very physical form, the mind has to function in a container of linear continuity, time, right? It has to function, operate in that space. That's how everything holds itself together. Without that continuity, we do not have the holding togetherness that keeps us in our form. That allows us all these really wonderful and fun and strong experiences. So the mind might not fully grasp this, and that's okay. It's just a thought. And what our wonderful star friends were explaining to us was that every choice that is made, whether it's big, whether it's small, in that moment, there is a multidimensional split, a holographic replica created. And I found this fascinating. I was like, oh, tell me more. And they were saying that, well, every choice that you make, especially big choices, creates alternate timelines. I say star friends as plural because, of course, there are many, many stars and many, many beings that are always ready to assist. It's eternally infinite. And they come together as a collective voice for me usually. But when I do separate them down, it would be the Arcturians that say, well, the mind is what makes up the matter, right? Mind makes up the matter. And any memory or timeline that you are recalling is being created in the moment that you remember it, even a past life, alternate dimension life. It's being created as the medicine of what you need in this precise moment. And so then I was asking them, I was saying, well, if that's the case, then what about the memory that we have of this life? And once again, the similar type of answer came up. And that was, well, it is being created from the perspective of the eyes which you have in this present moment. And I found that so beautifully simple and descriptive, yet at the same time mind-boggling. Because then if we look back on every memory that we have, anything that we choose to remember, anything that our body is remembering, anything that our mind is remembering, these are different layers of memory. And whatever we remember of something today, perhaps is even a completely different memory to how we would have remembered it a year ago. And we know that even though scenarios don't necessarily change, the perspective does, and it is perspective that builds the reality that we're in. And so I was finding this conversation really intriguing. I was like, oh, let's go deeper. And I was pondering some of the choices that I've made recently. And, and they could be really fun choices. They could be ones that were a little bit more challenging to make. And our star friends were saying, well, there is a version of you living out every option that was conceivable, perceivable. So I was like, So for example, in this physical incarnation, my physical memory and the memory of others is that I went on, for example, a China trip recently. And so I was like, oh, so then there is a version of me who didn't go on the China trip. And the star beings were like, yeah. I was like, oh, how fascinating. Okay, well, I mean, I've lived in many different places in this lifetime, lived in different countries, different continents. I was like, and all those were choices. There was a choice I made at one point, whether to go to Switzerland and be an au pair when I was much younger. And that fell through at the last minute. And at the time, I recognized it as divine intervention. But then I kind of look back and it's almost as though I can feel a version of me that did go to Switzerland and did do the au pairing. And it's fascinating because, especially having had a few days in a dry fast state, and I was speaking on Instagram with my lovely friend Jerome. I'm going to try and get that video up onto YouTube, by the way, because I know there's a few of you asking. But with a lovely conversation, interview, whatever you want to call it, that I got to have with Jerome yesterday, it really highlighted how much more there is when our nourishment is of a higher frequency. And when I say higher frequency, it's not in a judgmental way, it's literally in a state way. Like, for example, you have solid, liquid, and gas, right? If we're eating solid foods, that's a heavier frequency, it's a lower frequency, it's slower in energy. As soon as you apply more energy to it, it can become liquid, right? Like water. When it's very cold, it's going to be ice. When you apply more energy to it, more heat, it becomes liquid, and even more heat, it becomes gas, right? The air is full of water, And so it was really fascinating because with all that cleansing and clearing and recalibration, it's almost like it's allowing my sacred temple, this beautiful instrument of light here, to interpret and translate things slightly differently. And so I was going, oh, how interesting. So, I'm looking at all these choices that I've made, and even the ones recently, going, okay, even down to very simple and little changes. Whether you go out somewhere, whether you go and do something or don't do something. I went to see my friend compete last night, and she did amazing. She won. I was like, oh, there's probably a version of me then that didn't go out. There's a version of me that didn't do that. And it got me wondering then, and to kind of focus this in just a little bit more as to why I'm doing this video, it got me thinking a little bit about how we are embodying and which timeline, considering there's so many infinite ones, so much more than we can even really possibly perceive or grasp. Which one is it that we are here in? And I found that really interesting. Because then I was like, well, if there is such a choice, and there are so many splits of direction, and so many realities and realms and dimensions being created, how do we know which one we are in? Well, of course, we're in the one where we are in the body, of course. But it was almost like when we talk about things like quantum jumps, quantum leaps, what really is that about? Well, the way that our star friends were saying it is that it's like you are literally lassoing another reality and going, that's the one, I'm going to click on that one. That's the one that I want to bring in right now. And you can. But the key here is the physical body. And this is what I found interesting. This is what our friends were saying. Once again, I keep it as a collective because we now, like if I was to split it up, I'd be going, oh, this is more the Orions and the Pleiadians saying this now rather than the Arcturians. But they like to talk as one, through me anyway. You all might have a different experience. But it was just really interesting. They said the key is the body. And I was like, okay, tell me more. And they're like, well, it's the memory of the body. It's the logging of data and information of the body. It's whether the nervous system is triggered or relaxed. It's how regulated you are. It's what is in the body as well. What other external influences are there? How developed is the will and the drive within the being? You know, they were saying there's all these components. And to really simplify it, it brings it right back down to something which most people are afraid of. Yet it is the key of existing here in true harmony. And as simple as it is, that is our emotion. And this comes back to one of the very basic principles of this universe. You know, we've got many principles, right? The principles that form the universe, principle of polarity, of gender, of, you know, things like that. And then we have something which is very well known now called the law of attraction. Attraction and repulsion is the full law, the law of attraction and repulsion. And it's very popular now, which is a good thing, more awareness being brought to it. But to really understand the energetic dynamics is to also look at the biology of it as well, right? And that's what's really fun. Because if we look at how everything creates, and we always say, you know, what you focus on will grow, right? But it's also how you feel about that thing. Because the stronger the charge, whether it's positive or negative, the stronger the charge, the quicker it'll come. It's like putting fuel in the vehicle. But what is really incredibly beautiful here that I was reminded is that, well, the thing is, the universe, source energy, your higher mind, you in your truth, outside of the body, you've got it all covered. You're in a universe of love. You come from love. You will return to love. That is your source of energy, is love. Not the emotion love. Many of us misconstrue that. Not the chemical compound that people call love, which is actually just attachment. Not the chemical compound. Not the neurochemistry or biochemistry, which is what most emotions are, really. But when we look at the actual energy of love, right? And it's fascinating because when we look at the magnetic aspect of ourselves, you know, we have that electricity moving through us, that center pole, right? That point, that gravitational pull, and the emotions form this beautiful magnetic field around us. And so, if the nervous system is taught how to be regulated, if we learn to self-regulate, then we can help others regulate, co-regulate. That's the electricity, that's the gravitational pull, that's the central point. And then in the emotional side, if we see emotions, and we speak about this often, but if we see emotions as simply an indicator for the individual, that there is either alignment or misalignment within. Because it's at this point that the fragmentation of the timelines occurs. But also it's at this point that we can draw timelines in. Oh, now how exciting is that? It's at this point that, yes, fragmentation can occur. There's another dimension, another reality, another plane of existence being created in every single choice. Or at the same time, we can go, I'm going to bring one in right now. How? By feeling it. It's the secret sauce. I just thought this was really fun to ponder. And I could easily go on talking about this for much longer, but for right now, it feels like it's appropriate just to leave it there with you and your thoughts, to let your mind percolate, to accumulate, and to find different avenues to wander on down. See you next time for whatever next inspiration comes this way. And if you have any questions, or if you have any suggestions for what you'd like to hear on a video, just pop an email my way. You can go to aliceheath.com and go on the contact page to do so. It's always a joy to hear from you. So much love this rainy, nourishing, sunny, not so sunny right now, cloudy Sunday.